With the hype for Battlefield being back in full swing, we have learned quite a bit about the upcoming title, and as such one of the most prominent pieces of information was that for the first time since 2006, the game will not feature a traditional single-player campaign. However, it doesn't mean that there will be no substance to it and that it does not have a story to convey, but merely that its story will be told in a different way. It has been confirmed by Daniel Berlin that a lot of lore and exposition is going to be delivered through the new specialist system and their respective backstories, following the trend of many other AAA games which did a similar thing in the past few years. The game will also feature a battle pass which is likely going to form a narrative as the time goes on, and the new content is being released. Now, we do know already a little bit about the story of 2042 and how the world came to the brink within the Battlefield universe, so let's dive into it and explore both the past and a possible future. However, because it is a modern title, I think it is fair for us to go a little ways back in time and remind ourselves of some of the events from the past few games which led up to this point. The story of the modern conflict in the current Battlefield era begins in year 2014, when the US had deployed its troops in Iran as a measure against the rising threat of People's Liberation and Resistance Army, also known as the PLR. After a successful coup led by their leader, Farouk al-Bashir, the US efforts in the area have eventually uncovered that the PLR was seemingly in possession of two nuclear devices which have been stolen from Russia. An effort to find and stop the nukes which were meant to spark a war between the two superpowers was half successful, as the Russian GRU had failed to stop one of the nukes from going off in Paris. On the other hand, New York, which has been a target for the second nuke, was successfully prevented from sharing the same fate. Because of these events, Russia was partially blamed for the catastrophic destruction of France's capital city, which left their relationship with the West very tense despite avoiding an open war. Following the de-escalation of that conflict, eventually in the year 2020 a new one had brewed on the horizon. As a rogue Chinese admiral had orchestrated an assassination on a rising political figure in China as an attempt at provoking a war with America, the US had uncovered that Russians were prepared to align themselves with China in case such a war came to be. Unbeknown to most parties involved, the political figure, Jin Jie, had survived the assassination attempt and was secretly escorted out of Shanghai by US Marines. This eventually led to a coup and declaration of martial law in China by Admiral Chang, who also had triggered an EMP blast and began decimating the American fleet on the coast of South China Sea. Because of that, the US responded by invading the Chinese mainland, and even though their efforts eventually forced them to pull back, they have managed to secure intel pointing towards the Russian Siberia, where the first signs of a newly formed alliance between Russia and China have been found, the Pan-Asian Coalition. Seemingly, the two superpowers have joined forces in the development of experimental technology which involved a Titan-class airship, as well as mech units, hover tanks and more. As US operations have managed to sabotage their facilities, the coalition was likely left severely weakened as the conflict came to settle down once again. Over the next few years, these tensions led to a decline in international relationships across the world. Alliances broke apart, sea levels have risen causing natural disasters, economies have collapsed. We arrive in 2030s, dubbed a decade of chaos. The weather becomes more threatening to civilization, as in 2033 Hurricane Zeta forms, the first Category 6 storm in the world's history. It leads to global food and fuel shortages, which spark a second Great Depression in the following year. Not too long after that, these events caused the collapse of Germany, and subsequently fall of the European Union on August 8, 2045. All of this results in a displacement of the population, and those who are left behind end up banding together in an effort to survive in the new harsh reality. In the mainstream media, these outcasts are being called non-patriated. They themselves identify as no-pats. The New World Order leads to a slow but steady rebuilding of the modern civilization, as revolutions in energy, desert irrigation, hydraulic levees, and seawalls save coastal cities, which result in reclaiming of the farmland and re-establishing of global supply chains. This spark of newfound hope causes nations to reopen their borders and invite those who have been displaced in the recent years. However, with no way to repatriate 1.2 billion people, NOPADs become a permanent fixture on the global economic, military and social scenes. Broken trust towards their past governments results in many NOPADs refusing to re-assimilate, as NOPAD leaders emerge, inspiring a new kind of identity, not tied to a flag but to an idea. As the world attempts to heal itself, friction builds between the US and Russia as both remaining superpowers strive for control of this fast-changing world. In 2040, a sudden space debris causes a Kessler effect, which results in over 70% of all orbiting satellites to malfunction and crash back to Earth. The cause of the debris itself is unknown, as nobody is able to investigate the circumstances. This event leads to blackouts across the globe with devastating effects, such as destruction of the air traffic, collapse of the communication grids, and complete halt of the already jammed global supply chains. Subsequently, prices of oil, grain, and coal skyrocket exponentially. Over 100,000 lives are lost as a result. This is the last straw that pushes the world over the edge. There is no internet, no navigation, no surveillance, no weather and storm forecasts. With no way to spy on one another, many nations are plunged into distrust. Both US and Russia try to assign blame for the blackouts on each other, while others are suspicious of the NOPADs, accusing them of seeking to cause anarchy in the world. Due to rising tensions and hostility, the former military and combat-trained specialists among the NOPADs rise up and form unarmed task forces. Once again, the world finds itself short on the food and fuel supplies, which result in a shadow war between the remaining two superpowers. In order to maintain plausible deniability, both sides hire NOPAD mercenaries in order to fight in a proxy war with the promise of receiving a share of the remaining resources. As the conflict escalates, an open war is imminent. We finally arrive in 2042, as NOPADs are forced to pick sides and start fighting for their future. How the rest of that story is going to unfold is something we will have to see through the Battle Pass content, but even the base game is already establishing some context and exposition. Though we don't know a whole lot and presumably more is to be found within the game, DICE has already revealed some of the information about the maps in 2042, and gave us hints as to what is at stake when fighting in these locations. Orbital, set in the French Guiana, is a place of a controversial rocket launch which turns into a race against time. What exactly does it mean is yet unknown, but we can assume it might be a part of an effort to rebuild the lost satellite network, which may allow for one of the sides to gain an upper hand. Hourglass takes place in Doha, Qatar, a place lost to frequent sandstorms which led to a major shipping convoy being trapped within the shifting sands around the city. Securing the resources it may have been containing is likely the main cause of NOPADs engaging in this area. Kaleidoscope is set in a smart city of Sondgo in South Korea. The map features a data center in the middle which is a quantum-powered disinformation hub. After an attack involving the said hub threatens the global network, NOPADs are set to clash for control of the facility. Manifest, taking place on Brani Island in Singapore, is a key trade route and a vital point for the American supply lines, something that Russian forces likely have a lot of interest in taking for themselves, if not at the very least disrupting the trade. Discarded is a ship-breaking yard set on the coast of India, with one of the ships holding a stealth submarine containing a nuclear material, which obviously would be a big score for whichever faction manages to secure it. Breakaway is an oil and gas extraction hotspot set in Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. The fight for one of the most valuable resources in the world is going to take place across many industrial facilities, including an oil rig. And finally, Renewal brings us to a futuristic Egyptian farmland, which appears to be one of the very few places left in the world which are still capable of steady production of crops. As to what the future of this story will be, there are a lot of possibilities and avenues DICE may take. Of course, one of the things that come to mind is the relation and possibility of exploring the story as a prequel to Battlefield 2142. There are, however, some discrepancies between the old Refractor era games and the lore that has been set up for the upcoming game. For instance, both European Union and Pan-Asian Coalition have disbanded by the time of the game's main events. The circumstances around the formation of the Pan-Asian Coalition also differ between the old Refractor era games and the Frostbite era ones. While the original PAC faction was formed after the new Ice Age in the year 2106, in the new games they did make an indirect appearance within Battlefield 4, which takes place in the year 2020. One way to interpret this is that the old Refractor era games and the new Frostbite era ones may take place in separate timelines. If that's the case, then we may or may not see the re-emergence of both European Union and Pan-Asian Coalition in the future of Battlefield 2042. Either way, the possibilities for storytelling are vast, and one can hope that DICE is going to utilize this opportunity to grow out the lore. After all, the story of Battlefield 2042 is not a traditional story of a single soldier being the one-man army and saving the world by themselves. It's a story of thousands of soldiers collectively finding their way in the harsh and grim future, fighting for something better. But how that story is going to unfold is something that we as players will get to experience on our own.